Glen Klatovsky is the Deputy Chief Executive Officer and Campaign Strategist at 350.org, an environmental awareness organisation. He now joins us via Skype from Sydney, Australia, for more on the story. Glen, good evening and thank you for joining us on The Globe.
Yeah, good evening.
Now,
Thank you.
Glen, just watching those scenes there and, the tearful, couple going through the most. This is not an isolated incident. Thousands of Australians are going through the same emotions, having lost their livelihoods. Take us through what exactly has been taking place in Australia on the ground.
The word unprecedented has been used every day for months now in Australia. These fires are at a scale that we've never experienced before, not even close. It's extraordinary that we haven't had higher loss of life, but it is incredibly tragic that 24 people have lost their lives that we know of. And the losses of forests and woodlands, losses of native wildlife, of stock, of crops, of plantations, and the loss of closing in on 2,000 homes, businesses, and infrastructure is just devastating. And for all of us in Australia, we all have connections to places and people who've been impacted by these incredible fires, and they're happening right across the country in every state and territory.
Now, Glen, was there no warning signs with regards to the possibilities of such blazes or bushfires taking place in Australia, especially now through the drought season? It's very dry there.
Well, these are record fires, but they come on top of a record drought. Have there been warnings? Very much so. A group of former leaders of emergency services and fire organisations went to the Prime Minister in April this year, saying that the government needed to do something exceptional in the lead up to what was likely to be the worst fire season in history. That came true. The Prime Minister at the time did not meet with those former chiefs of emergency services and fire rescue organisations. And we've also had decades of climate science telling us that if we didn't act on climate change, that this was going to be our future, and now we are seeing it in our landscape.
Has there been any indication as to how some of these fires started? Was it human error, or was it just an eruption of, a fire that started and just spread through across?
Look, there's a whole mix. There's arson, there's lightning strikes, and a whole range of things. The scale of these fires is beyond anything experienced around the world. These are many times larger than the Amazon fires earlier in 2019 that the world was petrified about, many times larger, and many different fires. There's currently 130 fires in my state of New South Wales alone. One of the most horrific facts is that some of these fires are so large they create their own weather system, including dry lightning, from thunderstorms that they create themselves, which then creates further fire fronts.
Just speaking of thunder, lightning, and what you've just said, the fact that there was rain and cooler temperatures, which has brought some sort of relief, but huge blazes expected from later on in the week going forward. You've just touched on something. Can you explain that? How does that work? The fact that they're able to create their own rain and lightning.
Yeah, the scale of these individual fires is so huge, some of them in the hundreds of thousands of hectares on their own. These are more intense fires in many cases than we've experienced before. They tend to now burn in the crowns of the trees instead of along the ground, and they create so much heat and energy and intensity and smoke that they are causing their own local environment, and these include these sort of dry lightning storms. We do have a little bit of rain at the moment, which is fantastic, but it's nowhere near enough to put these fires out. The reality is that until there is long, substantial rain, many of these fires will continue to burn for months ahead.
Now, earlier on, you touched on the fact that there were warnings that, climate experts had come out and said to government, listen, there's a possibility of this happening. You need to get ready. And this was in April, you mentioned. Now, the fact that the Prime Minister has been lambasted together with his leadership, the government, of having not taken the Copenhagen Agreement seriously, where he's just sort of pushed it to the side. What's going to happen going forward now that the whole country is literally ablaze?
We have a government at the moment who've been in power for nearly 7 years. It's 2020. We're facing the greatest natural catastrophe in recorded history, and we currently do not have a climate change policy nationally. This government dismantled a former climate change approach that included a carbon trading system, a whole range of ways of contributing to global efforts to decrease the impacts of climate change. This government had largely walked away from them, and the coal industry and the gas industry in Australia has a huge amount of power in this country, and it has undoubtedly contributed to the fact that in 2020, we have no national approach on climate change at all.
And now, what's the way forward, Glen? What's the way forward? What are the people pushing for? And, the reaction from the Prime Minister, I saw a few weeks ago, he was away on holiday, and he was called back to return to the country to face a serious situation which clearly he seemingly took very lightly.
Yeah, look, it's... the path forward is complex. For those people on the ground who are facing fires or who've been hit by fires, it's a long, slow path to rebuilding those communities, those homes, those farms and businesses. And that is going to take a huge national effort supported by government and all of us. But long-term, Australia desperately needs a climate change policy and an approach that helps us deal with what we're facing. But more than anything, we need everyone else in the world to stand alongside us, because our country is going to be the most affected, or one of the most affected, by the impact of climate change. And we need the world to work cooperatively to deal with the amount of carbon dioxide in the atmosphere and how we're going to minimise the scale of warming. And
Glen, thank you so much for your time this evening on The Globe. That is Glen Klatovsky. He is the Deputy Chief Executive Officer and Campaign Strategist at 350.org, an environmental awareness organisation, joining us via Skype.